Okay, I made a video yesterday and somebody had a lot of questions to ask, and I'm not saying they're wrong, but I'm not necessarily saying they're right. Now, I'm going to back up a little bit. Every job that comes in the shop, depending if somebody's already worked on it, and usually they have, you always make judgment calls. Well, my judgment calls are from over 25 years of doing this, and sometimes trying to navigate away from problems and causing the customer a lot of expense and aggravation on both our parts. Okay, well, I had an oval port head and we were talking about them being improperly cut out. And this is one of the heads, the other head's done. Anytime you put a guide in a head, there's a good chance that you're going to run out from the original seat, and that's because of wear and picking it up and where the other equipment machines it, and you can be off a little bit. So that's going to require you moving the seat down in the head and what is called dreaded sunken valve. Well, that gets overused quite a bit, and I'm quite tired of that. In a perfect world, we'd put seats in everything and bring them right back up to original spec. That's time and material, and there's other things that can cause problems, like the original manufacturer put enough iron to put a seat in here. I've got plenty of seats, and I can put seats in for days. I've got a whole bottom cabinet full of seats, so I've got seats. That's not a problem. But it costs time and material to do that. Then at that point, you may be wanting to look at a better head. Okay, well, if you can see this, you can see that that shiny part would be where the seat is hitting is way, way low. Yeah, ideally we should be a little bit more towards the middle. It's showing it's seating outside of the valve. So to cut this out and to put the proper valve angles is not going to be a problem. Now the intake is sitting high, and this is just miserable. To be nicely, it's probably one of the worst valve jobs that I've seen, and I don't like throwing people under the bus. I'm sure this valve job was done over 20 years ago, and I got a sneaking idea who did it, but I'm not going to mention names. It just doesn't get you anywhere. Okay, now how I set up with the cutters is, now this is for the intake. Now I go in there and I've opened up the radius of the chamber with this, and then I hit the floor with this. And typically I'll go in with this cutter first. So it'll be establish my valve angles, go in there and clean out the chamber, and that's going to clean up the step off the floor. So that's going to be here. And then I'll go in with a 15 degree and I'll just take the little bit of the ledge out. Okay, now if you want to consider that a sunken valve and me chasing it out, hey, go for it. I got better things to do than worry about a valve that's typically probably down 30 thousandths. The cutter angles are baked in. So once I set my cutter off the angle, which would be the 45, I'm in for it. I'm going to go down until I clean up. Now you go past this, then you're starting to sink the valve. But when you have a profile like this, you're going to want to run the profile to the ledge, and you want it to clean up. Well, it's going to clean up when it cleans up, and once you're there, if you're down a little bit, then I consider that negative. Then you're sinking valves. Now we'll back up a little bit here. The chambers have never been opened up for bigger valves. Now the intake isn't too much of an issue, but I still like to go in there and true it up. You got to remember that these heads are done production, And probably when these heads were made, believe me, there probably wasn't no CNC. It was probably a multi-spindled machine coming down and doing all the intakes and probably doing all the exhausts. The assumption that these are all straight to the deck, you are wrong. They are not. I set up and I adjust the machine and I pilot off of each one. So if this one is off a little bit of an angle, it's going to reference off the guide and it's going to cut that seat accordingly. That is every single seat I cut on an aftermarket or a production head, I adjust my head to cut it. Okay, so the head is related to the table and to the axis of the machine to cut this properly. So let's talk about floating, or let's talk about valves that are sunk. This is a GM head right here. This is the heads that I've done. This is a set of Merlins that I have and that I have to do a valve job on. Let's take a quick look at these. This is factory for Merlin. This is factory for Merlin. Is the valve sunk down? Well, it's had a few valve jobs on it. Is the intake shrouded quite a bit? Yeah, it is. Would you call that sunken, or would you call that just as cast and maybe they could have did a little bit better work? Well, pick one. I've had these heads brand new and they look pretty much like this. Some guys will tell you there's a gain here to have the valve down in there on the exhaust side because the exhaust is pushing inward. Well, that's fine, but you know, the radius really could be better, whatever. Okay, now here's the heads that I've done. I can see the margin from the side of the deck. On a big block, that's pretty typical. I've seen guys machine these and not even put the valve down and have them above the deck, and if you do any big block Chevrolets, you're going to run into piston to valve clearance issues because there's a lot of drop height here. Am I down a little bit? Well, you know, I could be down a little bit. Do I consider that a sunken valve? Nah, I don't consider that a sunken valve. When I drop it down and I can't see the side of the margin of the valve, I consider that sunk. Did I go in here and trim a little bit? I most certainly did, and I also trimmed a little bit in here. You can see that. I've opened this up. I don't feel that this, and if somebody wants to argue with me, that's fine, but last time I checked, my name's on my shop, and I don't want to be a hard ass about it, but the bottom line is this is a decision I made, and I'm sticking with it. Now, this one here is just as bad, if not worse, and I would say that this one is probably worse. Okay, and this is a head that's been machined, but I don't think anybody's taken the time to machine that. So this valve is pretty much the same as my valve. So, you know, if this was an all-out race engine, would I be a little upset about that valve? Would I look for a bigger valve? Well, if it was an all-out race engine, I wouldn't be putting these heads on that engine. So, you know, everything is a decision that the owner and the business operator have to make a decision on. Obviously, the owner don't have much of a clue, and there's some guys that are on the internet that have clues for everything. I don't know how much work they get, but I do a lot of cylinder heads for a one-man shop. I've put out over 4 complete engines this week, or last 2 weeks, and I've probably done over 6 sets of heads this month, and probably by the end of the month I'll be doing over 8. Is that a lot? It's a lot for this old man. But, and another thing too is putting a bigger valve in a closed chambered head. And this, you know, you want to split hairs. This is a semi-closed chamber head. You're not going to gain a hell of a lot. Look at this head. See how far much you put a bigger valve in this head. It's going to affect the flow and it's going to work a lot better. This head is a little bit anemic. But The customer didn't want to buy new heads, and this is what I have to offer them. Like I said, everything in this business, you're going to be making sometimes decisions, and a lot of times it comes down to cost. So I don't know if that clears up things or not, but I thought I'd make this video to try to explain some things, which, I guess I really don't have to, but if somebody's interested in wanting to know about big block Chevrolet heads and why and what I've done, well, that's the explanation. I hope that helps or clears things up, and if it don't, it don't. If my valves are, if you want to call my valves sunken, I don't really care. You go ahead and you do that. But bottom line is when I'm done with these heads, they're not going to be much better than these. In fact, these will probably be better than these because I got to put guides in all these heads, both heads I should say, and that's going to affect the seat run out, and I'll have to cut them until they clean up. And I've already got, it's already quite deep in there. In fact, I can catch my finger on that one, and there's nothing there to be found on mine. So, okay, hope that clears things up.